While America was waking up, the king was going to sleep. For 20 years, Graceland operated in its own reverse time zone. What Elvis did at 3 a.m. wasn't rock and roll. It was isolation. And this bizarre routine changed what he ate, who he trusted, and ultimately how he died at 42. Before we explain why this matters to you, let me be clear. This isn't gossip about Elvis or his family. This is about recognizing dangerous patterns of isolation that destroy people, famous or not. Ready? Let's go inside. The most disturbing detail isn't the schedule. It's the sandwich. Elvis's daughter swears she never saw him eat the one food item everyone associates with him. Stay until the end to find out which famous Elvis habit was actually a complete myth. And if you want documentaries that dig past celebrity gossip to find real human truth, hit subscribe now. This is the man behind the king. Here's what you need to know. Elvis went to sleep at 5 a.m., woke up at 4 p.m. Ate breakfast at sunset for 20 years. His cook Mary Jenkins worked at Graceland for 14 years. She confirmed this in multiple interviews. She'd prepare eggs, bacon, biscuits fried in butter, what Elvis called breakfast, but serve it when normal people were eating dinner. Kitchen staff worked at night. Gardeners trimmed hedges in darkness. Guests arrived after midnight. While Memphis slept, Graceland came alive. Why? Performing at night meant his adrenaline peaked late. Sleeping during the day avoided crowds, but there's something deeper. Living at night meant living without boundaries, without the natural rhythm that regulates human behavior. Think about your own day. Sun rises, you wake up. Lunch around noon, dinner between 6 and 8. Bed by midnight. These aren't random. They're anchors. They create structure. They remind you time is passing. Elvis removed all those anchors. Day meant nothing. Night meant nothing. Only endless now. Consequences. Without time structure, meals became random. According to Jenkins, Elvis loved massive breakfasts, sausage, bacon, eggs, fried potatoes, rolls, everything swimming in butter. She described butter running down his arms. But these breakfasts happened at sunset, midnight, 3 a.m. Time lost meaning. Everyone at Graceland adapted. Staff operated on Elvis time. Want to screen movies at 2 a.m.? Projectionist ready? Racquetball at 4 a.m.? Friends show up. Record music at midnight. Musicians available. The estate existed in a bubble where normal schedules didn't apply. But here's what people miss. This wasn't just unusual. It was devastatingly isolating. When you live on a completely different schedule than everyone else, you can't participate in normal life. Can't meet friends for lunch. Can't walk in the park on a sunny afternoon. Can't go to church Sunday morning. Can't shop during business hours. Every ordinary connection to normal life gets severed. According to those who spent time there, Elvis created a self-contained ecosystem independent of Memphis, independent of normal American life. Inside the gates, his schedule was law. Outside, the world moved on without him. This separation deepened year after year. Question for you. Could you handle 20 years living backwards from normal society, totally isolated? Drop a comment. I'm curious. Elvis's life wasn't just reversed. It was governed by elaborate rituals that sound bizarre but made perfect sense as attempts to create order in chaos. According to his cousin, Elvis brought his own silverware to restaurants, his own spoon, knife, fork. Developed this as a child, maintained it his entire life. Why? Control. In a world where thousands wanted a piece of him, where his image belonged to everyone, bringing his own utensils maintained autonomy. This is mine. Nobody else touches this. Compulsive about brushing teeth after every meal. Creating rituals, small repeated actions providing structure in an unpredictable life. When the outside world feels chaotic, rituals create islands of control. Superstitions went deeper. If a black cat crossed the road, Elvis would detour miles out of his way. He dressed in specific order every time. Right sleeve, right pant leg, right sock, right shoe. Only then would he dress his left side. His cousin said Elvis was superstitious to the point of being suspicious of anyone who wasn't. Why does this matter? When we feel powerless, we create rituals. When we can't control outcomes, we invent rules. Elvis's superstitions were adaptive responses to a life that had become unpredictable. Here's a detail most people don't know. When Elvis was young, his mother took the inside knob off his bedroom door at night. He sleepwalked. Once wandered outside in his underwear and a neighbor found him. He was so embarrassed he often slept with his parents into his upper teens. Even as a child before fame, Elvis had difficulty with boundaries, between sleep and waking, between private and public. Fame didn't create these patterns, it multiplied them by 1,000. His stage movements literally wore out the toes of his loafers. Documented fact. His body moved so intensely, it destroyed his footwear. That same intensity shaped everything about his private life. What rituals do you have? Coffee from the same mug? Lucky socks? Drop a comment. You probably have more than you realize. Let's talk about what dominated Elvis's private life, but gets reduced to jokes, food, weight, brutal cycles of eating and dieting. Mary Jenkins revealed details in interviews. For breakfast, served at sunset, he wanted homemade biscuits fried in butter, sausage patties, 4 scrambled eggs, sometimes fried bacon. Jenkins described butter running down his arms. These weren't modest portions. The famous peanut butter and banana sandwich, fried in butter until the bread floated in grease, was something Jenkins and Elvis's father Vernon created together. Toast it first, then fry it. The result? Sandwich soaked in butter. But here's what's fascinating. Elvis's daughter, Lisa Marie, claimed in a 2003 interview she never saw her father eat one of those sandwiches. Not once. The sandwich, synonymous with Elvis, may not have been something he actually ate. The legend and the man diverged. Whether or not he ate that specific sandwich, the pattern is clear. Elvis had a complicated relationship with food that shifted dramatically. Early career, he was disciplined about diet and weight. His mother Gladys influenced him toward moderation. His ambition kept him focused. But as years passed, as isolation deepened, food became something else. Comfort. One of the few pleasures fame couldn't complicate. When you're Elvis, every interaction with another human is filtered through celebrity. Every conversation has an agenda. Every relationship is unequal. But food is simple, direct, provides immediate satisfaction without complexity. By the late 60s into the 70s, Elvis's weight fluctuated dramatically. He would diet intensely, staying in his room for days, barely eating. Then abandon the diet completely and indulge heavily. Restrict, then binge. Classic pattern when eating becomes about control rather than nourishment. Jenkins described situations where Elvis would be dieting and she'd prepare careful meals per doctor's orders. But Elvis would find ways around it. He'd insist he hadn't eaten when he had. Friends would smuggle forbidden foods. The battle over food became a battle over autonomy. Think about this from Elvis's perspective. Millions of people felt entitled to comment on his body, to photograph him, to analyze and judge. His body wasn't just his body, it was public property. Everyone had opinions about how he should look, what he should weigh. In that context, eating becomes rebellion. Gaining weight becomes asserting, "This is mine, I decide." But that rebellion has consequences. By mid-70s, Elvis's weight had increased significantly. Physical changes were obvious. Performances suffered, health declined, mobility decreased. Here's the tragedy. The act meant to assert control. Eating whatever he wanted ultimately took control away. Weight affected health. Health problems required medical interventions. Interventions created new dependencies. Food also represented connection to his past, to his mother, to a time before fame. Southern cooking was what Elvis grew up eating. It was comfort, physically and emotionally. Every bite connected to simpler times, to childhood, to Gladys, who he lost at 23 while serving in the army. Gladys's death in 1958 devastated Elvis. He called it the great tragedy of his life. His mother had been his anchor. After she died, that anchor was gone. The food she might have cooked became even more important. So when we talk about Elvis and food, we're talking about grief, comfort, control, connection, isolation, all tangled together. Have you ever used food to cope with feeling powerless? Drop a comment if this resonates. We're halfway through and I want to interact with you. What strikes you most so far? The reversed schedule? The rituals? The food? Comment below. I read everyone. Here's why this matters beyond Elvis. Every detail reveals how humans respond to extreme circumstances. You've experienced isolation. You've felt powerless. You've developed coping mechanisms. Elvis's story is your story, magnified. If you're finding value here, subscribe to the man behind the king now. We create content that respects subjects and audiences. And the most bizarre detail is still coming. The padded doors, the paid friends, the final habits that revealed everything. Let's continue. During 20 years at Graceland, the upstairs was off limits except by Elvis's direct invitation. Even today, 40 years after tours began, those rooms remain closed. The bedroom where he slept, the bathroom where he died, preserved exactly as he left them. Billy Smith, Elvis's cousin who spent his life at the king's side, described the layout. You went upstairs and encountered huge double doors, padded. Beyond those, 2 more sets of double doors. One led to his office, the other to his bedroom, then bathroom. Multiple padded doors. Think about padding your bedroom doors. You want soundproofing, creating barriers between yourself and the world. But it also means cutting yourself off, building walls that work both ways. Keep the world out. Keep you trapped in. According to the Memphis Mafia, Elvis's friends/bodyguards/employees, the upstairs was Elvis's refuge, where he retreated when exhausted, where he tried to sleep, though he struggled with severe insomnia, where he kept books, spiritual texts, private thoughts. But here's the paradox. Even in that private space, behind padded doors, he was rarely alone. The Memphis Mafia existed to keep Elvis company. To prevent isolation, he simultaneously craved and feared. During the 60s and 70s, roughly 15 people were on Elvis's payroll essentially to be his friends. Their job was friendship. They lived at Graceland or nearby, available whenever Elvis wanted company, often at 3 a.m. Think carefully. Can you have real friends when those friends are employees? Can you trust affection when you're paying their salary? Can you distinguish genuine connection from professional performance when everyone has financial incentive to keep you happy? According to Memphis Mafia members themselves, their role was to indulge whatever Elvis wanted. Rent entire movie theater at midnight? Done. Play racquetball at 3 a.m. They showed up. Spontaneously drive to Denver for a peanut butter sandwich, which apparently happened. They went along. Their job was yes, always yes. But saying yes to everything isn't friendship. It's enabling. Real friends challenge you, tell you difficult truths, push back when you're making mistakes, maintain boundaries. But when you're paying people, when their mortgage depends on keeping you happy, that dynamic becomes impossible. Several Memphis Mafia members expressed regret later. They wondered if they could have done more, intervened, set limits, been honest instead of enabling. But in the moment, with families to support, with loyalty to someone they genuinely cared about, they defaulted to yes. This created an echo chamber. Elvis's perceptions went unchallenged. If he believed something, everyone agreed. If he wanted something, everyone helped regardless of wisdom. If he made a decision, no one questioned. Over time, this eroded his ability to judge reality. When no one ever disagrees, when every idea seems brilliant because everyone says so, you lose calibration. You forget how to test thinking against external reality. Example. In 1970, Elvis met President Nixon at the Oval Office. According to accounts, Elvis wanted a badge as a federal narcotics agent. Think about the irony. Nixon gave him the badge despite zero training, zero qualifications. But no one in Elvis's circle stopped him. No one said maybe this isn't wise. Everyone went along. Same pattern with health decisions. As Elvis's condition deteriorated through the 70s, he had relationships with several physicians who prescribed various medications. The Memphis Mafia watched, worried privately, but intervening meant risking jobs, access, income. Most stayed quiet. The Memphis Mafia weren't villains. They were humans in an impossible situation. Many genuinely loved Elvis. They'd grown up together, shared experiences, built lives around him. But the fundamental inequality, Him paying their salaries poisoned authentic friendship. Elvis recognized this at some level. According to accounts, he would express loneliness even when surrounded by people. He'd wonder who really cared about him versus his money and fame. But recognizing a problem and solving it are different. The upstairs rooms, those private spaces behind padded doors, represented desperate attempts to create sanctuary. But real sanctuary requires more than physical separation. It requires psychological safety, emotional honesty, relationships based on equality. Elvis never achieved that. This brings up a crucial question. What responsibility do we bear for creating these conditions? We as society, fans, consumers of celebrity, we demand constant access to famous people, feel entitled to their time, image, bodies, private lives, photograph without permission, comment on weight, analyze relationships, reduce them to entertainment, then act surprised when they become isolated, when they struggle to trust, when private lives collapse. Think about that. Comment. If this changes how you view celebrity culture. Final details of Elvis's private world that reveal how deeply his habits reflected inner struggle. Small, strange telling habits. Elvis dyed his hair religiously, naturally blonde, but starting as a teenager, gradually darkened it over 3 years until it reached jet black. Then for the rest of his life, once monthly, he used dye to touch up hair, eyebrows, sideburns. He was extremely conscious about appearance, had minor cosmetic adjustment to bridge of his nose. This constant maintenance reveals something. Elvis understood his image was construction, something requiring active work to maintain. Public Elvis wasn't natural. It was created, performed. Every month, touching up dye, he was reminded public Elvis was a character. He was a black belt in karate, training from Army service in '58 through his death in '77. He took martial arts seriously, practiced regularly, demonstrated skills to others. He sought structure through martial arts. It provided clear rules, defined hierarchy, measurable progress. In a life where so much felt chaotic, martial arts offered something concrete. Do this move correctly, achieve this result. Pass this test, earn this belt. Simple, reliable. Historical records from mid-70s indicate Elvis developed patterns reflecting increasing isolation. RCA Records had to send their recording truck to Graceland in February '76 because Elvis wouldn't go to a studio. They set up makeshift studio in the Jungle Room. From there, working in his own home because leaving felt impossible, they produced his final albums. Early career, Elvis couldn't wait to get into studios. Music was joy, energy, connection. By mid-70s, 20 years later, leaving Graceland to record had become overwhelming. The world outside felt too dangerous, too demanding. So the world came to him, enabling his isolation while trying to keep his career functioning. Elvis also developed habits around compulsive spending. He bought Cadillacs impulsively, more than 100 during his lifetime. Expensive jewelry for himself, friends, employees, strangers. Once gave a $30,000 ring to Sammy Davis Jr. spontaneously. When you can buy anything without thinking about cost, buying loses meaning. When you can give gifts worth more than most annual salaries, those gifts stop being special. Compulsive spending was symptom of deeper problem. Elvis tried using money to create connection, and meaning money can't provide. His final years, 74 to death in August '77, marked by obvious decline. Performance schedule remained grueling. Toured constantly, one-night stands across the country. But performances deteriorated. Weight fluctuated. Voice became uncertain. Audiences noticed. Yet through this, Elvis maintained certain routines. Still dyed hair monthly. Still practiced karate when health allowed. Still ate butter-soaked breakfasts at sunset. These habits were desperate attempts to maintain continuity, to hold on to identity, to assert that despite everything falling apart, some core part remained constant. August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died at Graceland. 42 years old. Official cause? Cardiac arrhythmia. Reality more complex. Years of health struggles, weight issues, isolation, demanding schedule had taken irreversible toll. His heart stopped alone in his bathroom, in that private space behind padded doors, in the sanctuary that never provided the peace he sought. Here's the takeaway. Elvis wasn't just a cautionary tale about excess. He was a human who faced extraordinary circumstances and tried to cope with available tools. The reversed schedule, rituals, complicated relationship with food, paid friendships, compulsive spending, all adaptation. Some healthy, much wasn't, but profoundly human. We look at celebrities and think lives must be wonderful. Money, fame, adoration, opportunities. But Elvis's private world reveals different truth. Without structure, freedom becomes chaos. Without boundaries, choice becomes overwhelming. Without genuine connection, success becomes isolation. What's one thing you learned you can apply to your life? Drop it in comments. That's the end of our exploration. We've walked through his reversed schedule and isolation, examined rituals and superstitions, understood complicated relationship with food, gone behind padded doors and seen impossibility of genuine friendship when power is unequal. Looked at final habits as everything fell apart. So one more time, what strikes you most? How do his experiences connect to challenges we face about authenticity, connection, control? Comment below, not just about Elvis, but what his story teaches about being human. If this gave you new perspective on Elvis, if it helped you see the human behind the legend, if it made you think differently about fame and isolation, subscribe to the man behind the king now. We create content that respects history and humanity. We dig deeper than gossip to find universal truths. Share with someone who needs to hear it. Whether struggling with isolation or control or feeling lost, Elvis's story, told honestly and compassionately, offers genuine insight. Thank you for exploring the private world of the king. Elvis Presley was extraordinary talent who lived extraordinary life, but also human who struggled with loneliness, searched for authentic connection, tried to find meaning when normal structures vanished. His story teaches us to look beyond surface, recognize humanity in public figures, understand success and happiness aren't the same. Remember, every legend was first a person navigating impossible circumstances with limited tools. Treat yourself with compassion you'd want others to show you. Take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time.